A single mother, cast out by her late husband's family, was left with nothing but a run-down gas station everyone had long written off. But then a millionaire happened to meet her and her son there, and it was he who helped her find a brass key and unlock a hidden underground door. That's when they realized she hadn't inherited a pile of scrap at all. Amanda once thought she'd found stability, a husband she loved, a family she believed she could trust, and a future she thought had been built on solid ground. But when her husband died suddenly, everything collapsed, quietly, completely. As for the estate belonging to Cameron Whitaker, since the will wasn't updated after the marriage, most of the assets, by law, revert to the corporation and direct family members. Amanda looked up. "You mean my son and I aren't inheriting anything?" Crane gave a slight nod, flipping through a few more pages. According to a special clause from Cameron's grandfather, the estate could only be transferred with a reconfirmed signature from the family management board. Cameron never did that. "I'm very sorry." She heard the rustling of paper like wind blowing through dry leaves. Mrs. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, hands folded, as if preparing to deliver a final judgment. "We've considered the matter. To avoid turning you and the child out on the street, the family will transfer usage rights of an old property to you, a gas station in Luna County, right on the state border." Another voice chimed in, a man with a half-smile. "It used to be a supply point back when my grandfather ran the western trade routes. No one's used it in years. If you're thinking of starting over, well, at least it's a roof." Amanda didn't speak. She just stared at the paper being slid across the table. Toward her, an old property deed, the ink still fresh and blue. She picked it up, her hand slightly trembling. Not from emotion, but because in that moment she understood. They didn't see her as family. Not just today, never. Not even once. On the drive back, Amanda sat behind the wheel of her old car. Liam had fallen asleep in the passenger seat. The gas station, the only piece of land left to her, existed on paper as a string of dry coordinates. It looked like some cruel joke. She pulled over, hazard lights blinking amber in the dark. The deed sat in her lap, fluttering slightly beneath her fingers. Not from emotion, but because she understood, with piercing clarity, that she had been cast out neatly, thoroughly, and entirely within the bounds of the law. No doors had been opened for her, but no one had tied her hands either. Amanda stared out the windshield. The night wind swept red dust across the hood. She gently pulled her son closer, resting his head on her shoulder, and sat still. She didn't cry, didn't complain, didn't curse anyone, because she knew the only person she had leaned on was gone, and now it was her turn to stand up for her son. Ahead, in the dark, was the road to a place she never thought she'd call home. An old gas station, abandoned for 10 years. The only property still in her name. And maybe the one thing her husband's family had rushed to discard without ever bothering to take a second look. Amanda closed her eyes and whispered, "Let's see what they missed." The wheels came to a stop on a bed of dry grass covering cracked concrete. The gas station appeared like a wind-flipped skeleton, its tin roof slanted to one side, the price board faded and blurry, and 2 rusted pumps sat motionless like abandoned scraps of metal. Along the side, a door leading into a small building was locked with a rusted padlock. There was no fence, no voices. Liam sat up straight in the passenger seat as the car jerked to a halt. He looked outside, then turned to his mother. "Is this our house?" Amanda didn't answer right away. She shut off the engine, her hand still on the key. It wasn't that she didn't know the answer she did, but she was trying to swallow the hollow feeling that had rushed in the moment she saw the faded letters on the roof. Full service. They opened the door with the key that had come in the deed envelope. The hinges creaked like the sigh of a place that had long been forgotten. There was no smell of death, only dust, dampness, and the hollow silence of a place that once held life and now held only traces. That evening, Amanda cleaned without stopping. Liam used a dish towel to wipe the warped wooden cabinets under the old cash register. They laid a thin blanket on the floor in the back of the shop, what used to be a storage room, and made it their place to sleep for now. All night, the wind slipped through the crack in the back door, not loud, but steady and unrelenting. Liam turned over and whispered, "Mom, is Grandma going to come visit me?" Amanda didn't turn around. She switched off the flashlight, pulled her son gently into her arms, and answered softly, "No, honey. She's very busy." The first person to notice someone had moved into the gas station was a middle-aged woman who lived 3 houses down. She stood still behind her trash bin, eyes fixed on the newly opened door. After tossing her garbage bag, she kept her front door slightly ajar and pulled out her phone. "Yes, the old abandoned station. I saw her with a kid. Skinny, pale. Heard she's the Whitakers' daughter-in-law." The next day, Amanda was struggling to replace a cracked section of pipe under the sink. She didn't really know how, but she'd watched a downloaded tutorial video carefully. After buying a few PVC pipes and some adhesive, she crouched down, hands dusty, patiently fitting each piece together. It wasn't about the money she couldn't call a plumber, because nearly everyone in this town had, at some point, done business with the Whitaker Group. That name alone was enough to make people avoid her like a fire. Right at noon, a silver SUV rolled slowly into the old gas station's driveway and parked just outside the glass doors. A man stepped out, polite in appearance, but without unnecessary gestures. Crisp suit, polished shoes, a leather briefcase in one hand, and a thick folder in the other. He didn't look around, just knocked 3 times on the glass with his knuckle. Amanda came to open the door. Liam was asleep in the back, curled on a small inflatable mattress. "Mrs. Reyes?" the man asked, looking directly at her. "I'm Martin, legal counsel representing the Whitaker family." Amanda gave a slight nod, one hand resting on the edge of a chair, not because she needed the support, but out of instinctive caution. "I'm here to discuss the legal status concerning your son," he said, placing the folder on the wooden counter, cutting straight to the point. "This is a proposal from our client, requesting that you voluntarily relinquish custody of Liam if you cannot prove you have the means to raise him properly." Amanda didn't touch the folder. She folded her arms, her expression steady. "This is a small town," Martin continued. "All it takes is a single report and a court's confirmation for social services to get involved. Under current circumstances, they'd have every reason to reassess custody." "Liam is my son," Amanda replied, voice calm, neither raised nor soft. "And he's the grandson of a woman who's willing to provide everything for him, a stable home, a decent future. You have 3 months to show financial capability. If not, custody will go to Liam's grandmother," Martin said, his face unchanging. "Liam's not some item to be passed around when it's convenient," she said slowly, "and he's definitely not a gift to be bargained over." Martin didn't argue. He nodded as if completing a routine task, left the folder on the counter, and turned to leave. The door closed behind him with a cold finality, but it wasn't the end. That night, as Amanda was reheating soup on the small gas burner, the light bulb flicked off, plunging the room into darkness. She exhaled slowly, then reached for the flashlight. From the back, Liam stirred and called out in a sleepy voice, "Mum?" "I'm scared." Amanda hurried over and knelt beside the mattress, holding the flashlight so it pointed toward the ceiling, careful not to shine it in her son's eyes. She wrapped her arms around the boy. "We're okay. We're still okay. Are they trying to take me away?" She held him tighter. The beam of the flashlight silently swept across the wooden roof, where an old gas price sign from 1997 still clung to the rafters. "Listen to me," she whispered. "I won't let anyone take you from me. No matter what happens, I won't let that happen." Liam nodded, closed his eyes, and rested his face against her chest. The wind pushed through the roof's cracks, carrying a soft whistling sound like a quiet warning from a place long forgotten, now stirred by someone's return. She didn't know then that this makeshift shelter, so temporary in appearance, would change her life completely. Amanda was checking the newly connected water pipe when she heard a faint pop. Then the engine died, just a short way up the road, no more than 30 steps away. She squinted. A 1965 Chevy Impala, the kind only collectors would bother to keep, had come to a stop with its hood thrown open. A silver-haired man in a neat but unpretentious button-down shirt was bent over the engine bay. He turned a bolt, gave the ignition a try, then leaned back in. He fiddled for a while, but it was clear the car wasn't going anywhere. Amanda set the wrench down on the wooden workbench and walked slowly toward the car. She stopped a few paces away. "Need a hand?" Her voice was firm, neither too friendly nor too distant. The man turned. Sunlight hit the edge of his black-rimmed glasses, shadowing part of his eyes. He offered a polite smile and dabbed a bit of oil off his thumb with a paper towel. "Looks like the spark plug's dead," he said. "Should have checked it before I left the last rest stop." "There's no garage around here," Amanda replied, glancing at the blinking temperature gauge on his dash. He nodded. "I've got a repair kit in the trunk, but I feel like I've seen you somewhere before." Amanda furrowed her brow slightly. "I'm not sure." "No worries," he shook his head, bending back over to adjust a wire. "Must be mistaken." Amanda pointed to the patch of shade near the edge of the porch. "You can push it over there. The sun gets brutal this time of day." He did as she suggested. Once the car was steady in the shade, Amanda handed him a glass of water and a dry cloth for his hands. They didn't speak for a few minutes, just the soft ticking of the cooling engine and the chirp of sparrows on the sloped roof. "Would you like to come inside to wash up?" Amanda asked, after noticing him glancing around for water. "Thanks, if it's not a bother," he said. As he dried his hands, his eyes wandered to a white mug on the top shelf, the rim slightly chipped, the words faint, but still readable. "Larkspur Books. We stay late for readers." Julian paused. "This mug," he murmured, then looked up at her. "The bookstore on the corner in Santa Rosa. You worked there?" Amanda turned, her brow knitting. "A long time ago. I did night shifts there for a bit back in my freshman year." Julian blinked. A faint smile crossed his face, his eyes tracing some long-forgotten path through memory. "Then, maybe you really are her," he said, uncertain. "I wasn't sure at first, but that night, I never forgot it." Amanda tilted her head slightly, but before she could say anything, he continued. "It was a night of pouring rain. I was soaked to the bone, freezing. I'd been walking for hours with nowhere to go, no wallet, no name. Then that bookstore door opened, and the girl standing inside, that was, you didn't ask why I had come." He paused. His eyes had drifted somewhere far from the present. "You handed me a cup of tea. Didn't ask a single question. Let me sleep behind the counter, and the next morning, you pressed a piece of dry bread and an old newspaper into my hand. You didn't know it then, but that door, that night, it saved me." She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. "I think I remember. You were the man in the white tank top with a backpack, right?" This time, he laughed. "That was me." She gave a small, surprised laugh of her own, unforced, natural. "I thought you were someone running from something," Amanda said, her voice trailing off. "I was a little worried, but you didn't ask for anything." Julian nodded, eyes fixed on his cup. "I never forgot that night, and how you never asked my name." Amanda poured more water into his cup, then pulled a chair over and sat across from him. She leaned in slightly, just enough to close the distance, not too close, not distant either. Julian sat down across from her, took out a handkerchief to gently wipe his forehead, and exhaled, like setting down something heavy on the table. A short silence followed. Then he looked up. His eyes met hers, soft and steady. "That night, you saved me. Not with the tea or the place to sleep, but by not asking who I was." Amanda didn't answer. She just held his gaze calm, with a touch of caution. Julian went on, slowly, as if weighing each word. "Now let me ask you, why would someone like you be living here alone, with a small child, in this old gas station?" She turned to the small window, where sunlight spilled across the worn tile floor. "Because this is the last thing they left me, after taking everything else," she said softly. Julian didn't interrupt. Amanda leaned back in her chair, eyes drifting into the distance, and began to speak, not to complain, but as if she were untangling an old knot, about a marriage she once believed was love, about her wealthy but distant in-laws, about the son who had been her only reason to hold on. She didn't dwell on the pain, just spoke as if she were folding up a chapter of her life. "And then they told me I should start over. They think this abandoned gas station is a way to erase me from their name." Julian listened to the end, his hand resting gently on the table. He didn't respond right away, but his eyes had changed, not just with understanding, but with resolve. "I've never believed in owing anyone," he said, his voice low but firm. "But you're the exception. It's time I pay that debt." Amanda tilted her head slightly. "I'm not waiting for anyone to pay me back. It's not because you need it. It's because I need to do what's right, this time." The faint sound of an engine echoed from a distance. A tow truck had pulled into the front lot. Julian stood, picked up his tool bag, then looked back at her one more time. "I have to go, there's something that can't wait. But I'll be back. Not for the car. For you, because you didn't turn away when I was nobody." Amanda said nothing. She just gave a small nod. As he stepped out the door, she stood in the dim sunlight, watching the silhouette of the Impala being towed away across the dusty yard. In her hand, she still held the glass of water, untouched. But this time, it was no longer cold. And her heart was no longer entirely empty. 2 days after their first meeting, Julian came back just like he said he would. No call, no notice. The old Chevy Impala sat still beneath the patchy awning, where sunlight poured across spiderweb cracks in the concrete. The car door swung open, and he stepped out carrying a large toolbox, a new coil of electrical wire, and 2 primary circuit breakers. Amanda didn't ask why he'd returned. She simply opened the door, cleared a path, and set out a jug of cold water and a clean rag for his hands. They worked together in a silence just comfortable enough. When he reached the breaker box near the rear storage shed, Julian frowned. This part of the cement looked strange. Amanda followed his finger to where the concrete rose unevenly. The patchwork seams had rippling edges that didn't line up with the surrounding floor. Water from the indoor sink also tended to pool in that spot, though the rest of the gas station floor was nearly level. Maybe someone patched it, she guessed. Julian stood upright and stretched his back. If it was patched, it should be clean and even. This looks more like someone tried to cover something up. Amanda said nothing, her eyes still fixed on the concrete. A memory stirred Cameron used to stop by the station often, staying longer than necessary, back when they were still seeing each other. She'd never thought much of it, assuming it was just one of several properties his family had him overseeing. "Can you break through it?" she asked. Julian didn't answer. He simply turned back to the trunk and pulled out a chisel and a steel hammer. Within 15 minutes, chunks of concrete had peeled away, revealing a sheet of metal embedded deep in the floor, a mechanical safe, the kind with an old-fashioned dial lock. No fingerprints, no key cards. This kind of lock used to be common back in the 80s and 90s. Not so much anymore, Julian muttered, wiping his hands on the cloth. Amanda knelt down and gently touched the rusted metal surface. Beneath the dust, 3 faintly worn numbers circled the dial, just enough to show it had been turned before. "What numbers do we try now?" Julian asked, eyes still locked on the face of the lock. Amanda looked up, thinking. She gave the dial a slow turn from left to right and stopped. Her hand froze on a familiar sequence. 07-11-2014. Their wedding date. A crisp, dry click broke the silence. The safe door creaked open, dust trailing down in a faint streak. Inside was a thick stack of files, sealed in a plastic pouch, neatly placed beside a yellowed ivory envelope with worn edges. Amanda reached for the envelope first. The handwriting was familiar, messy, but deliberate. C.W. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the letter. "If something happens, this is the part I prepared not for the future of the Whittaker family, but for my real family." Beneath the letter were a savings book, stock certificates, and records of long-term investment transactions, all under the name Cameron Whittaker, but transferred into independent trusts, separate from the Whittaker family's financial network. Julian flipped through the pages, stopping at the final confirmation. Shares worth tens of millions of dollars in a global renewable energy company. This wasn't just a side bet. He had a full divestment structure set up without anyone noticing. Amanda looked at him. Cameron once said, he didn't believe his parents would leave me alone if something happened, but I thought it was just something he said in a moment of doubt. She took the letter back, reading it slowly, line by line. No more tears, but something shifted in her gaze. Coldness melting into release. Bitterness giving way to gratitude. "He didn't abandon us," she whispered. "He built an escape route. He just didn't get the chance to open it." Julian closed the file and placed it back carefully. "Keep everything safe," he said, "and don't let anyone know, not yet, especially not the Whittakers." Amanda nodded, her hand tightening around the envelope. For the first time in months, she felt she wasn't just standing in the ruins, but on the foundation of something new. A man had loved her enough to plan for the time when he would no longer be here. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the dusty window. In the small kitchen behind the gas station, the soft tap of a crayon hitting the table echoed gently. Liam was sitting cross-legged on the floor, intently coloring in a police car on an old piece of paper. Julian sat across from Amanda, placing a folder on the table. The pale yellow ceiling light cast a dull glow over the crinkled pages with red-inked annotations, old numbers that suddenly felt heavy. "My attorney's finished reviewing everything," he began, his tone gentle but firm. "I've requested access to the archive in Albuquerque, the one holding the bank records Cameron used." Amanda didn't answer. She set her glass of iced tea down, eyes still following Liam as he carefully filled in each outline. Julian spread the papers out across the table, pointing at the figures. A stake in a solar energy company, a private bond investment, 3 savings accounts under Cameron Whittaker's name, each clearly marked, not affiliated with Whittaker Group. He looked at Amanda. "These started in 2012, before you and Cameron got married." Amanda ran her fingers along the edge of the paper, as if touching a piece of her late husband she'd never seen before. "He'd already been preparing," she whispered. "Even without a clear reason." Julian nodded. "And no one in the Whittaker family knew. Everything was filed under a personal, independent identity. Liam toddled over, holding up the drawing he'd just finished. "Look, Uncle Julian, my car's on fire." Julian leaned down and examined it carefully. "Wow, that car might be faster than my old Chevy." Liam giggled and scampered back to the window corner to keep drawing. Amanda watched her son in silence. When she turned back, she met Julian's eyes, not the gaze of someone talking about money, but of someone trying to protect something old and decent. Julian pulled out another folder, this time with scanned property records. "This is what made me dig deeper," he said. "This gas station since 1996, it's been owned by the Whittaker Group. But in 2013, the title was quietly transferred to Cameron personally. No public notice, no updated tax filings." Amanda frowned. "He never said anything about buying this place." "Maybe this was the spot he chose as his backup vault," Julian replied. "Somewhere no one would expect, no one would notice, but quiet enough to keep what mattered most." Liam let out a long yawn, lay down on the floor, and hugged a thin blanket. Amanda gently draped her coat over him. Julian watched, then lowered his voice. "My attorney confirmed if the property is under Cameron's name and the safe is buried here, then everything on the land goes with it under inheritance law, and according to state law, the widow and biological child are the direct heirs." Amanda said nothing, but a part of her suddenly felt lighter, not because of the money, but because it meant Cameron had never truly let go. He had just quietly prepared, as always, starting with the smallest things. Early that morning, just as Amanda finished folding Liam's bedspread, a news headline popped up at the top of a local website. "Widow living at abandoned gas station, unexpectedly named heir to Whittaker family's multi-million-dollar investment." Beneath the headline was an old photo. She was standing just outside the station door, Liam holding her hand, sunlight catching in her tangled hair. A few miles away, Julian Carter had just poured his morning coffee when he saw the headline too. He read it twice, then sank into his chair. A wave of unease swept across his face. The news had spread faster than he'd expected, far too fast, and it hadn't come from him. It hadn't come from Amanda. Julian double-checked every communication he'd made, then called his legal representative directly. After some digging, they uncovered the source. A bank employee. Someone who had handled the account verification had quietly passed the information to a blogger in exchange for a payout. From there, it had spread like oil spilling across water. He ended the call, quietly packed up his briefcase, and drove straight to the gas station. Julian arrived just as sunlight spilled across the rusted awning. Amanda opened the door without a word. She stepped aside to let him in, her eyes searching not for an answer, but for confirmation. Julian gave a slight nod and set the newspaper down on the wooden kitchen table. "It's out," he said, voice low. Amanda looked down. The photo took up nearly half the front page. She was holding Liam's hand, walking across the sunlit station yard. No screaming headline, but enough to make people stop and read. She pulled out a chair and sat down, fingertips resting on the edge of the paper. "Who leaked it?" Julian shook his head and slowly sat across from her. "The bank. Someone on the account verification team saw my name. Sold the story to a small-time blogger. After that, it caught fire, like a match hitting dry grass." Amanda didn't respond right away. In the next room, Liam was still lost in his wooden block set, but she knew the world outside wasn't far from the worn wooden door of the old gas station anymore. Julian looked at her, his gaze tightening. "This will reach the Whittakers. It's only a matter of hours now." And he wasn't wrong. On the top floor of the Whittaker Group headquarters in Santa Fe, Joan Whittaker set her porcelain coffee cup down on its saucer with a sharp clink that cut through the silence of the boardroom. Outside the glass wall, the high desert sun beat down on the windows, bright, but without warmth. In front of her lay a thin dossier delivered that morning by Graves, the family's longtime estate manager. This investment. Joan turned the pages slowly, her finger coming to a halt on a line-itemed asset list. Is it real? Graves nodded. An independent attorney verified it. The assets are in Cameron's name, transferred gradually from 2012 to 2019. No involvement from the Whitaker Group, no input from the family advisors. And who verified these holdings? Graves hesitated just a beat, then answered, a team of legal experts under the sponsorship of Julian Carter. Joan looked up, the first trace of a crease appearing between her brows. Julian Carter? You mean Carter Systems? What's he doing involved? Unclear, Graves replied, but it seems he's assisting someone named Amanda, the woman holding the documents. Joan leaned back in her chair, arms crossing over her chest. An unknown widow and a reclusive billionaire. Either that's a coincidence, or there's something here we're not seeing. Her assistant stepped forward quietly and laid a printout of a news article on the table, an image of Amanda and Liam standing in the sunlight outside a gas station. The headline read, "The Woman and the $1 Million Whitaker Secret." Joan glanced over the photo, then gave a small nod. "Get the car ready," she said, rising. "We're going to see her. Not to accuse, to find out what exactly Cameron left behind. That's got both the press and Julian Carter looking in the same direction." Graves silently gathered the documents. And Joan, through it all, never once referred to Cameron as her son, only as the one who'd left a crack unsealed in the Whitaker legacy. The Monday morning, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of the gas station. Amanda had seen them coming. She stood in the kitchen, Liam in the back, flipping through a coloring book. 3 people got out, a sharply dressed attorney, Graves, and Joan Whitaker. No greetings, no small talk. They walked straight into the house. The lawyer set the file down on the table. "We need to establish your motive. Why did you discover that amount of money and not notify the deceased's legal family?" Amanda kept her voice calm. "Because I didn't think I owed anything to people who refused to acknowledge me as family." Joan crossed her arms and stepped closer. "You chose to stay silent, and now you suddenly show up with a man who holds financial power. What exactly are we supposed to think?" Amanda didn't answer. She looked Joan straight in the eye, unwavering. The lawyer interjected, his tone firm. "We're considering filing a lawsuit for unlawful possession of unidentified assets and exploiting your connection with Mr. Julian Carter for personal gain." At that moment, Julian stepped out from the adjoining room, his voice low but clear. "I'm afraid you're making a baseless accusation. I have no personal relationship here beyond serving as a legal guardian assisting in verifying Cameron's investment records. Everything is notarized and fully within the law." Joan gave a cold smile. "Since when does a man like you go out of his way to verify someone's assets just because he happened to cross paths with a woman again?" Julian answered simply, "Since that woman once helped me when I had nothing, and now I'm doing what I believe is right." Joan paused for a beat, then turned to the lawyer, her voice lowered. "Make the offer." The lawyer placed an envelope on the table. "The family is prepared to offer a settlement of $400,000 in exchange for you relinquishing all claims and rights related to Cameron Whitaker's investment." Amanda responded immediately. "No." Joan tightened her grip on her purse strap. "You're clinging to something that isn't yours. You won't win." Amanda slowly opened her bag and took out a handwritten letter. "I don't need to win. I just need to honor what the man I loved left behind. And my child, he deserves to know that his father didn't abandon his mother. The SUV pulled out of the driveway, kicking up a cloud of red dust. Amanda stood watching it go, not blinking. Julian stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the way her hair fell down her back. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "I know," Amanda replied, "and next time, I won't just stand and wait." Just a few days after the tense encounter at the gas station, the local news site Desert Eye unexpectedly published a sensational headline set against an old sunset photo of the gas station. "Gas station widow inherits millions. Under cloud of suspicion. Whitaker family calls for investigation." The article described Amanda as a young woman with no apparent job or qualifications, once briefly involved with a member of the Whitaker family, now living in seclusion with an unidentified older man. There was no mention of Cameron's handwritten letter, no details on investment records or legal documents, just vague language, carefully crafted to stir doubt. Amanda sat silently in front of the old tablet screen, her hand resting on Liam's shoulder. The boy was off in the corner, drawing trucks, blissfully unaware. She looked at the headline a third time, her throat tightening. Julian stepped in from the backyard, wiping his hands, scrolling through the news on his phone. He set his teacup down on the table and said nothing for a while. "Liam's going to see this someday," Amanda said quietly, "and he'll think his mother was a thief." Julian looked up. "Not if we take back the narrative." He sat down and pulled out his phone to call the lawyer. After a brief discussion, they agreed on the next step: gather every piece of evidence from financial investments and bank confirmations to Cameron's handwritten letter and prepare a formal response for defamation and invasion of privacy. But the story had already moved beyond legal lines. Just a few days after the tense encounter at the gas station, the local news site Desert Eye unexpectedly published a sensational headline set against an old sunset photo of the gas station. "Gas station widow inherits millions under cloud of suspicion. Whitaker family calls for investigation." The article described Amanda as a young woman with no apparent job or qualifications, once briefly involved with a member of the Whitaker family, now living in seclusion with an unidentified older man. There was no mention of Cameron's handwritten letter, no details on investment records or legal documents, just vague language, carefully crafted to stir doubt. Amanda sat silently in front of the old tablet screen, her hand resting on Liam's shoulder. The boy was off in the corner, drawing trucks, blissfully unaware. She looked at the headline a third time, her throat tightening. Julian stepped in from the backyard, wiping his hands, scrolling through the news on his phone. He set his teacup down on the table and said nothing for a while. "Liam's going to see this someday," Amanda said quietly, "and he'll think his mother was a thief." Julian looked up. "Not if we take back the narrative." He sat down and pulled out his phone to call the lawyer. After a brief discussion, they agreed on the next step: gather every piece of evidence from financial investments and bank confirmations to Cameron's handwritten letter and prepare a formal response for defamation and invasion of privacy. But the story had already moved beyond legal lines. That night, Amanda spotted a strange car parked across the street. The headlights were off, but the faint smell of cigarette smoke drifted on the breeze. The next morning, the back door behind the station had been unlocked. Liam burst into tears. His favorite teddy bear was gone from the bed. Amanda checked the temporary security camera mounted in the corner of the yard. The image was grainy, but there was a figure in a dark jacket and a baseball cap slipping through the fence. Julian said nothing the entire morning, then quietly called a close friend in civilian security and requested a full surveillance system to be installed within 48 hours. "The Whitakers won't hold back," he said. "If they get their hands on Liam, you won't even have a case to bring. They don't need you in jail. They just need you out of the picture." Amanda didn't respond right away. But that afternoon, she brought Liam back to his room, sat down on the edge of the bed, and held his hand. "I'm not letting anyone take you," she said, "even if I have to fight the whole damn world." The next day, a formal petition was filed by Amanda's legal team with the state court accusing the opposing party of attempting to gain custody through intimidation, defamation, and unlawful intrusion into private life. Julian reached out to an investigative reporter from the Southwestern Journal, someone known for exposing abuse of power among the wealthy elite, and arranged a private interview, submitting legally verified documents tracing Cameron's financial origins to counter the wave of misinformation. The following day, the headline made front page: "The Truth Behind the Gas Station, the Untold Story of the Wife Left Behind." A black and white photo, Amanda leading Liam across the yard in the early morning light, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. Behind them stood the gas station, not abandoned, but under repair. Beneath it, a quiet subhead: "When powerful forces try to bury a story, who's left to tell it?" That afternoon, Julian looked at Amanda over a cup of tea, just as the installation truck pulled out of the driveway. "Media doesn't change the truth," he said, "but it decides who gets believed. And today, you just won back a little piece of justice." Amanda didn't answer, but she glanced out the window where a lone swallow had landed on the power line. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was just running. She felt like she was stepping out to fight. In the days that followed, Amanda's phone began receiving strange calls. At first, they were from blocked numbers silent whenever she answered. Then came real calls. A polite female voice speaking on behalf of a representative office. After that, emails with an electronic signature from a law firm based in Santa Fe. All of them carried the same message, carefully worded. "The Whitaker family wishes to speak directly with Mrs. Reyes to reach a private agreement in order to avoid damaging the reputations of those involved and to protect the child's well-being." Julian read every letter, then quietly asked, "Would you like me to respond?" Amanda closed the laptop. "They don't want to talk. They want to bury the story and buy my silence. And if that doesn't work..." Amanda gave a faint, humorless smile. "Then they'll sue, and this time, in public." As expected, a week later, the law office representing the Whitakers officially filed a lawsuit with the state court. The complaint listed the following: unlawful possession of property pending legal determination, damage to the reputation and honor of the Whitaker family, psychological instability of the guardian. Amanda sat up straight as she reached the final line. In the next room, Liam was playing, his voice rising as he called out names of plastic dinosaurs on the rug. Julian placed his hand on the file. "We don't prove we're right by shouting louder. We prove it by showing who's telling the truth." She nodded, her eyes clearer than they'd been in months. "They're trying to cut every last thread tying me to Cameron, but I won't let them not without knowing it was them who threw those threads away in the first place." But the media storm arrived faster than the SUV had left the driveway. On local forums, the comments began pouring in. One account wrote, "The girl at the gas station doesn't look like someone smart enough to handle millions. More likely there's someone behind her." Another chimed in, harsher. "Using a death to snatch up assets? If Cameron were alive, he'd be ashamed of what she's doing." Within less than 24 hours, photos of Amanda leading Liam through the market, waiting at the bus stop, even carrying groceries at the supermarket, began circulating, each one tagged with mocking captions and intrusive speculation. At the bakery where Amanda had once bought Liam's birthday cake, the woman behind the counter whispered, "See?" So, it wasn't just coffee and loneliness after all. Even Liam, during his art class, heard two kids whispering behind his back. He didn't understand it all. He just turned and asked his mother with a puzzled look, "Mom, what does illegal mean?" Amanda had no answer. At that time, Julian was finalizing the countersuit page after page of financial records, notarized documents, handwritten letters from Cameron, and old voice recordings between two men who had once trusted each other. Each piece was legitimate, but none of it was enough to silence a public whipped into a frenzy by rumor rather than truth. So, they chose to go public, but not by handing the story to the media. Instead, they invited a team of independent financial investigators to audit the entire chain of transactions. Julian leveraged an old connection to bring in a small but reputable accounting firm from Santa Fe. They worked for nearly a week around the clock. Meanwhile, Amanda, for the first time in her life, handwrote a legal statement. Each word trembled, but her resolve was steady. "I'm not trying to prove I deserve anything. I just want people to know I did not deceive anyone." When the file was submitted to court in response to Whitaker's lawsuit, Amanda stood silently outside the county courthouse, late afternoon sun, casting long shadows on the stone steps she once thought she'd never climb. Julian handed her the folder and said quietly, "They can tear the truth into 100 pieces. But if each piece is right, then in the end, they'll have to put it back together our way." Amanda nodded. She didn't smile, but in her eyes, for the first time, there was something stronger than exhaustion. Conviction, not in the outcome, but in the path she had chosen. 3 days before the trial, in the 12th floor office of the Whitaker Group building, Mrs. Jones stood in front of a large glass board, holding a thick case file in her hand, her expression unreadable. Graves, the estate manager, placed a USB drive on the conference table. His voice was slow, with a hint of satisfaction. "We found her. A woman who lived with Amanda at a women's support center in Arizona, back in 2013. Her name is Lila Moore." Joan turned, her eyes darkening. "And she's willing to testify?" Graves nodded. "For a reasonable financial arrangement, and under the condition that her identity remains confidential." Mrs. Joan glanced at the attorney. "Do we still have time to present it to the court?" "Enough," the attorney replied. "If the trial starts Monday, we can file for a special witness under State Statute 37C, Emergency Supplemental Testimony." Joan sat down and slowly lifted a cup of peppermint tea. "Good. If we can't take Cameron down directly, then we strike at the past of the one he chose." Morning, in Santa Fe, began with a quiet, grey light. Amanda stepped out of Julian's car, her hand gently holding Liam's wrist. In front of the county courthouse, a few photographers were already waiting. They didn't call her name, just raised their cameras, like silent mouths that could still wound without speaking. Julian shielded her as they passed through the security checkpoint. Beside them was attorney Olivia Chen, silver-haired, thin-framed, but with steady eyes, carrying a thick case file bound with a red string. The main courtroom was brightly lit. Across the aisle sat the Whitaker legal team, 3 men in grey suits, one of whom had once served as Deputy State Attorney General. Next to them sat Joan Whitaker, expressionless, dressed in solid black. No greetings, no nods, only scrutinizing eyes, and one clear goal: to sever Amanda from all ties to Cameron, including Liam. The hearing opened with the property dispute. Boyd, the Whitakers' lead attorney, rose, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Your Honor, the investment registered under Cameron Whitaker, the deceased husband of the respondent, was formed during the course of the marriage. There is no notarized will, no documentation confirming any intent to transfer assets to Amanda Reyes. Therefore, all proceeds and benefits derived from said asset belong to the undivided estate of the Whitaker family." Attorney Olivia Chen responded calmly. "This investment account was opened in 2012, 2 years before Cameron got married. Under Section 17, subsection C of state law, it qualifies as separate property. Attached is a notarized copy, along with a handwritten note. If I can't speak to them, then let time speak for me. Boyd said nothing more, but his glance shifted toward Mrs. Joan. He knew keeping that portion of the estate intact would be an uphill battle. When the hearing moved to the guardianship issue, Boyd changed his tone. This is the last child bearing the Whittaker name in the third generation. We do not question the defendant's love for her child, but is love enough to shield him from psychological instability and an unsafe living environment? The screen behind him lit up. Amanda sat on the front steps of a gas station, hair disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. Liam played with sand near a rotting fence. The gas station door was locked from the inside. No one answered. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Boyd continued. An audio recording from a neighbor confirms that Liam was repeatedly left outside alone. Medical records show the defendant received treatment for postpartum depression. The question is this the kind of mother who can support a child's healthy development? Olivia Chen stood and objected, calling out the argument as gender-biased. The judge nodded, asking that it be entered into the record. Boyd turned to Amanda and asked, "Ms. Reyes, in your view, why would someone like Cameron choose you, a woman with no family name, no degree, no clear future?" Amanda raised her head. "Because he knew I'm the kind of person who won't turn away when someone needs me, even when things get really hard." A recess was declared. Amanda sank onto the bench in the hallway, her back curved, as if every ounce of effort had just drained from her body. Julian sat down beside her, speaking gently. "You don't have to win everything today." Amanda replied softly, "But if I lose today, then everything with Liam is over." When the hearing resumed after the break, the room felt tighter, as if the air itself had thickened. No one spoke. No one moved. Attorney Olivia Chen asked the court's permission to present an additional piece of evidence. She pulled from her case file a sealed USB drive, a handwritten letter with verified handwriting, and a sworn statement from a witness. Keith Marlowe, a renewable energy expert who had worked with Cameron in Denver during the final year of his life. "We are submitting a recording kept by one of Cameron's close friends at his own request. The original file is unedited and includes a digital timestamp that matches the official record of the conference event." The judge nodded. "You may play it." The audio began a little static at first, then gradually clearer. It was Cameron's voice, deep, steady, thoughtful. "If I no longer have the chance to speak for myself, let this be heard. I don't want Amanda and our child to fall into my mother's hands. I've made preparations, because I know I'm not her biological son. I found the adoption papers while cleaning out the old storage room. She hid that truth her whole life, and I understand why. She was afraid of losing everything, afraid that someone without Whittaker blood might inherit anything. But true legacy isn't in blood, it's in choice, and I choose to leave my part to Amanda and our son." The courtroom was silent. Graves sat motionless, then slowly bowed his head. Mrs. Joan Whittaker, for the first time since the trial began, leaned back in her chair, eyes wide, one hand gripping the armrest so tightly, her knuckles turned white. Boyd, her attorney, rose as if to object, but the judge raised a hand. "This recording shows clear testamentary intent. It is sufficient to be considered a valid limited will under Section 24, Clause E of the State of New Mexico. The court orders it sealed and submitted for independent verification by a third party." He paused for a moment, then spoke firmly. "Temporary custody of Liam shall remain with his biological mother, Amanda Reyes. All assets registered under Cameron Whittaker's name, excluding those under the Whittaker Group, will be temporarily frozen pending an investigation into their origin under joint legal oversight." Any attempt to coerce, defame, or unlawfully approach the defendant or minor Liam will be considered a violation of the protection order. The judge's gavel came down light, but decisive. The hearing was adjourned. Afterward, Amanda stepped outside with Julian. The early afternoon sun angled across the stone steps. She sat down, still holding the old letter from Cameron, its corners worn, the edges creased from being folded and unfolded too many times, always with hesitation. Julian sat beside her, saying nothing at first. He pulled out a bottle of cold water and handed it to her. Amanda took it. She drank a small sip, then looked toward the courtyard, where Liam was chasing his shadow in the late breeze. "How did you know Cameron wasn't their biological son?" she asked, without turning to look at Julian. He was quiet for a moment. "I wasn't sure until I found a preserved adoption list in the old real estate files. Joan Whittaker's signature was on it, dated before Cameron turned 2. "And you still trust him?" Julian nodded. "Not because of the name he carries, because of how he lived and who he chose to leave the future to." Amanda didn't say anything, but in the fading light of day, her eyes no longer trembled. Because today, for the first time, someone had spoken the truth on her behalf. The final ruling was delivered on an April morning, when the Santa Fe sky was so clear it seemed almost transparent. The judge opened the document and read each sentence aloud, clearly and deliberately. After reviewing the financial evidence, valid witness testimony, and the verified wishes expressed in the recorded statement, the court rules as follows. Mrs. Amanda Reyes is the lawful heir to the personal assets held under the name of Mr. Cameron Whittaker. All investments established prior to the marriage, properly notarized and not routed through Whittaker Group, shall be returned in full. Regarding the care of the minor child, Liam Reyes, the biological son of Mr. Cameron and Mrs. Amanda, will continue to reside with his mother under the terms of the existing custody agreement. The Whittaker family has no legal or media authority to interfere with the private lives of the mother and child in question. There was no applause in the courtroom, but the way Julian placed his hand on Amanda's shoulder, gentle, firm, and not overbearing, made her feel for the first time in a crowded room that she could breathe. 3 months later, Santa Fe welcomed summer with dry winds that carried the scent of dust and mesquite, and sunlight thick and golden, like ripe honey, spilled over the edges of adobe walls. The old gas station on Cerrillos Road, abandoned for years, its roof once rattling with every storm, had been reborn. The tin panels had been scrubbed and repainted in a warm brick red, the kind that softened under morning light. Wide glass doors replaced the old dented aluminum ones, opening into a quiet space where the day's first light pooled across polished concrete floors. Above the entrance hung a hand-carved wooden sign, simple but carefully made. The letters had been burned deep into the grain. The Second Mile. Locals started coming by, at first out of curiosity. They stayed because it felt different, steadier somehow. The cafe opened every morning at 6, with the scent of hand-roasted beans drifting out to the sidewalk before the sun had fully cleared the rooftops. Garlic butter toast sizzled on the griddle, and a juicer hummed behind the counter, squeezing oranges, prickly pears, and blood-red plums from nearby farms. But the real heart of the place sat quietly in the western corner. Mounted on the wall in a thick oak frame was a letter faded slightly at the edges, but clearly preserved. The paper, once folded, bore the unmistakable imprint of hands that had held it tightly. It was the original letter from Cameron, the one that had surfaced when no one expected it to, the one that had made people pause and rethink what they thought they knew. Next to the frame was a photograph, the rusted safe, its lock still broken, sitting in the dirt like a buried truth unearthed too late. Below it, neatly arranged behind glass, were photocopies of Cameron's handwritten notes, some on napkins, others on scraps torn from receipts. His handwriting was uneven, hurried in places, but unmistakably personal. Visitors didn't speak much when they stood in front of it. They read slowly. Some blinked more than usual. A few came back, just to stand there again, as if trying to understand something they'd once missed. Beneath the display was a small brass plaque, the letters engraved with quiet reverence. For the one I love, when I'm no longer here, to say all the things that should have been said. No spotlights, no background music, just a quiet hum from the ceiling fan overhead and the distant clink of cups from the counter. Most didn't know the full story, but they felt it, and somehow that was enough. Amanda didn't tell the story like a victim. Whenever a customer asked, she smiled, invited them to sit, poured some more water, and spoke slowly, as if she were recounting the story of an old friend who had gone away. She told it because it was no longer a burden. It was a way for others to understand. Some things, if kept inside, will die with you. But if shared, they might save someone else. Liam is 8 this year. He was given a section of the back wall of the cafe to paint freely. What he chose to draw wasn't a house or the sun. It was an old car stopped in the middle of a desert. Behind it, a long straight road stretching endlessly to the horizon, where everything started to change. One afternoon, when the cafe had quieted down, Julian came back. He sat at the old wooden table by the window, where Amanda was polishing a glass. No blazer, no investment pitch. Just a simple proposal. This model could be replicated. Places like this, stopping points for people who need a new beginning. I want you to be the face of the brand. I'll just support it. Amanda looked at him for a long time. Then she set the glass down. What makes you think I'd start all over again? Julian smiled this time, no longer holding back. Because you're not starting over. You're simply continuing from where someone else left off. And I may not be the first in your life. But I could be the one who stays, if you'll let me. There was no reply right away. But that evening, as Amanda locked up the cafe, Liam ran out ahead. He pointed up at the sky, where the last light of sunset was spilling across the clouds. Mum, the sky's so beautiful today. Do you think Dad sees it too? Amanda took his hand, and her eyes lit up as if the sun had reflected from somewhere deep inside her. She answered softly, without needing to think. I think your dad would be very proud. They stood like that mother and son beneath a sky no longer heavy. No need for revenge. No debts left to settle. Just the need to live right. And keep living. Amanda's story from a widow pushed to the very edge of prejudice to a woman who stood up to protect her child, her honor, and the love she lost is not just a legal journey. It's proof that while the truth can be hidden, it can never be erased. And justice, at times, begins with the unwavering belief of one person who refuses to give up. Have you ever found yourself doubted, dismissed, simply because you didn't have a loud enough voice? Do you believe that even if the whole world turns its back on you, as long as one person believes in you, everything can change? If you've been through something like that, even just a little, please feel free to share it with me in the comments. I read every word you write because I truly care. Are you doing okay today? And if not, that's okay too. At the very least, you're not alone. And if you need a story to help you keep going, I'm still here to tell, to listen, and to walk this road with you. Thank you for your time. See you in the next story.